Greetings, family. Welcome back to the Learning Channel here on YouTube. Dr. T. Owens Moore. I had some things to talk about today. We're going to talk about suppression is the new pandemic. Suppression. We didn't say repression. Didn't say oppression. We said suppression. That's like the act of keeping something from happening. Living in a democracy, why would people want something to be happening? Why would someone to want to focus on you not having access? That's what suppression is. So the problem, the dilemma of artificial intelligence and the nasty nature of politricks in a so-called democracy will be analyzed. When we say politricks, those politics is really tricking you. We're in a democracy, so why shouldn't everyone have the right to vote in a democracy? If it was really democracy. Artificial intelligence being used against us to thwart our progress. Hey, it's very helpful for, managing through some technology, but it is manipulating and controlling many of us. So solutions. I'll get right to the solutions before I get to my presentation. Read. Be aware of your surroundings. Read. Be critical of what's happening in the world. Read. Tune away from the mainstream mind-manipulating media. Read. Can't stress it anymore. And then engage and make positive changes in your lifestyle. I found it interesting looking at this old school book called 1984. It was actually written in 1949 by George Orwell, although it wasn't his real name. But George Orwell wrote this novel talking about Big Brother is controlling your access to information. Now, this is 1949. We're now in 2024, and we're talking about thought crimes sought out by the thought police. You can't just say whatever you want to say because people will not just ridicule you, but the system will shut you down. How does that even happen? Well, some of the slogans that were in the book 1984, war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. Some people have a hard time grappling with what Orwell was saying about that, but war is peace. You see, if you create war, and you're the one that is the, let's say, minority in the world, but you create the war, you now create peace because you have the people fighting against one another, but you're at peace, and you're making money off of the weaponry. Freedom is slavery. So you think you're free, but you're actually locked in bounds. If you were free, then why can't everybody vote? Ignorance is strength. That's how the powers that be remain in power, by keeping you ignorant of what's going on. Therefore, they control what's really happening. So these slogans were stated a long time ago. We see them manifesting today. So thought crime sought out by the thought police. What brought me here is that YouTube actually removed content from my channel, both in 2024. Both of these were old school presentations, and one was actually a science article that I read that is a peer-reviewed article, and YouTube took away the information pertaining to it. Both of the comments state, we wanted to let you know our team reviewed your content, and we think, tell you what that thought police, we think it violates our medical information policy. We know you may not have realized this was a violation of our policies, so we're not applying a strike to your channel. However, we have removed the following content from YouTube. One of them was the presentation on anatomy of an epidemic, weapons of global destruction. The other one was the antiviral effects of melanin and COVID-19. Now, there were no copyright infringements, but they felt as though it should not be on this channel. Perhaps AI suppression is also having impacts on seeking information about people's websites. So there's algorithms that go out there that channel people to and away from information. So I just thought it was interesting because perhaps they are also moving people away from certain videos. In 1984, They had this 2-minute hate like segment, like TV would come on and everybody would just say all these nasty things and hate. And you think about the Trump rallies and the vitriol that's being exposed. And in the Purge movies, you've ever seen all those Purge movies about you have like a few hours just to go out and kill somebody and not have any retribution, but just kill. So that's a mentality. But you think about 1984, the book, it was talking about this 2-minute hate. Also, doublethink was a term expressed. Think about today, eradication of a non-Eurocentric education by Republicans. They don't want to have anything to do with anything outside of Eurocentricity. I don't hear that black stuff. They're dismantling affirmative action. I guess the greatest affirmative action was for white people to have jobs, but now that they consider reverse racism, now we're in a mode of canceling that. So that's doublethink. The main character in 1984 was Winston. He reflected on this comment. The past had not merely been altered, it had been actually destroyed. That's why it's important for us to read to know what actually happened. For how could you establish even the most obvious fact when there existed no record outside your own memory? So if they erased all this information from our memory, we don't have any books to read, we have no knowledge, we can't even go back to what the real story was. So the party slogan was, who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. That's why this discussion on history and what should be taught in schools is such a problem. Look at this current event we just had here in September. Hurricane Helene destroyed some places in the South. Travesties, tragic. Helene made landfall September 26th on the Florida Panhandle as a massive Category 4 hurricane, stranding residents, destroying homes, and knocking out power from millions of people. The National Weather Service already warned, said it was coming. Some people didn't take it seriously, of catastrophic and potentially life-threatening flooding as the storm headed inland, and it created some havoc. More than 210 people are confirmed dead after the storm tore across the southeast. A compilation of official figures confirms 212 fatalities across North and South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, and Virginia. Man, it was devastating. I'm in the Georgia area and did not get hit that bad in the northern region, but Valdosta got hit hard, and in North Carolina, Asheville, North Carolina, underwater. Devastating. So this is an image of Gatlinburg, Tennessee, but the news report said this is an AI-generated image. It's fabricated. It's not even real. Who would want to manipulate something like this? People who want to manipulate images. This is not true. In the article that discussed this, said there's an image at the very bottom there where the red arrow is. This is not true. So that image, it indicates that it is artificially generated. So I'm just saying, look how information is manipulated in front of us. We don't know what's happening. So this is a computer doing that. But I have this interesting video of a news reporter in Atlanta who's describing near the black campuses like Spelman, Morris Brown College, Clark Atlanta University, Morehouse School of Medicine, Clark Atlanta. I mean, this is now an area where this news reporter is sharing this information. I thought this was kind of revealing about the disconnect between cultures. You can listen to this.
Really hard in making sure that people who are unhoused in the city were safe last night. They actually went around providing transportation, getting those folks into shelters, or actually using the AMC campus to make sure that they were out of the element.
Now, I can be hypercritical because I live here, but AMC is a movie theater. It's the AUC, Atlanta University Center. So I'm making this comment because a lot of people are disconnected from the cultural experience of some people. And so when you negate the opportunities for people of African descent to have their own institutions, You don't see it, therefore it doesn't exist. So it wasn't AMC, said that publicly. It was AUC. I just thought that was kind of disturbing, because it explains the difficulty we have with making connections between cultures. So this storm is a problem that we're all dealing with right now, but it's just a matter of how you interpret what's really happening. Sometimes the Black communities get hit harder and not getting the right assistance. And we go back to Hurricane Katrina, what happened with the African people there in Louisiana. Suppression. So when we manipulate information or suppress, you don't have access to how it used to be. Alabama has an anti-diversity, equity, inclusion law. They shut down the Black Student Union there and the Queer Resource Center at this institution, University of Alabama. Alabama just played in a big game against University of Georgia. Exciting game on the 28th of September. Alabama won. One of the ex-presidents was there in the stands and kind of created an odd environment, but in Alabama with the whole Confederacy and that mentality, it was interesting. After the game, one of the reporters interviewed a football player, and it says tight end C.J. Dupree said he didn't think it was a big distraction. They were asking about how did you feel about Trump being in the box office watching the game. If anything, he found it, quote, kind of awesome, unquote. So this Black male, I'm sure, because most of these big PWIs with these football programs are run using a lot of the Black male performers, even on the basketball courts. I don't get into politics. I don't vote. Whew, that's devastating. Black male in college, playing football, running ball. I don't vote. I don't get into it just because I don't think I'm old enough to need to get into it right now, Dupree said. But I thought it was awesome to have that kind of icon at the game. I just think it's just the ignorance that's being spewed, where people aren't really focused on the important things in life, but interested in ball games. To say you don't vote, that means you don't understand the history of what this country has done to people who have been disenfranchised. So suppression and miseducation. So here that Black male is at a PWI playing football for these big institutions, and we have on the grand scale a lack of Black males going to school, period. So we have a lack of them at HBCUs, and I teach at one, and I may see 3 out of 4 in a whole class of 40 people every semester. Sad scenario. It's like the new bald eagle. Some of the decline is attributed to a K-12 pipeline issue. That's why people talk about the school to prison pipeline that disproportionately impacts Black male students. The belief gap theory suggests that non-Black teachers have lower expectations for young Black students than they do for non-Black students, which can influence Black men's perception of school, causing them to be disinterested and disengaged. Therefore, you can see them suppressed and not actively involved in seeking higher education. You see these brothers selling water or at the stoplight, and you wonder, why can't that brother go get a skill like plumbing, like electricity? I'm just something rather than trying to sell water to make a living. Suppression of education, suppression of news resources. After diversity pushback, some faculty feel left in the dark at North Carolina's flagship university. That's Chapel Hill, North Carolina, Chapel Hill, UNC, another big PWI that uses Black males for sports. And then when I tried to open this article, I couldn't find it anymore. I was intrigued because when I read the article, it had this guy named Tim Moore as one of the representatives who is not supporting diversity or critical race theory or anything dealing with Black people and their history. So I'm scratching my head. How could this story be now removed? If I push on this and try to click on it, you won't find it. It's not available. So I'm like, who is this Tim Moore guy? Because don't associate it with me. Moore is a 52-year-old Republican, not me, is in his record 5th term as House Speaker and one of the state's most powerful elected officials. It will be his last, marking the end of a chapter for a man who first saw the General Assembly as a teenage page and who spent his life immersed in politics. This is not me. Don't get it twisted. I'm not against black education. The troubled last days of Speaker Tim Moore. And it says, on the heels of Scott Lasseter's lawsuit this spring, this news agency ran a story headline, North Carolina House Speaker Tim Moore's growing list of scandals. It happens all the time in this Republican kind of agenda. They say the Democrats were scandalous. Then the Republicans and the Democrats say the Republicans are scandalous. The bottom line is that there's a list of scandals that you can see with that guy running for president, and here you have a Republican candidate doing the same things. I'm just saying, this is not me. Do not get it twisted. So when you look at that movie called They Cloned Tyrone, oh my goodness, did they clone Tim Moore? That is not me. I'm not against black education and diversity. So in North Carolina, what can North Carolina schools say about America's history with racism? Now, this is a 2021 bill, but it says the bill passed the House today, 66-48, with no Democrats supporting the bill and no Republicans opposing it. It goes next to the Senate. It's about removing black or other information about cultures out of the school system. So James Galliard, on the other hand, says the only person to speak against the legislation in the House committee called the bill a "don't hurt my feelings" bill. This is when we're talking about people who have a problem with information that they're either uncomfortable with, never heard of, and it makes them feel like their feelings are being impacted. Well, look, in North Carolina, there's a true story done in a movie called The Best of Enemies, starring Taraji P. Henson and Sam Rockwell. And excellent movie. It's done in 2019. It's about what happened back there in the 60s and 70s, and people trying to start to get together and integrate. And white people didn't want the black people going to their school. Black people need to have access, but the white people burn up their schools. We see the story all the time. This is just a movie and a time frame where at the end of the movie, this white Ku Klux Klan member and this black organizer actually became friends. So in North Carolina, it can be done. But we fast forward today, we see the Republicans dismantling anything about diversity. So there's a racial divide. Under this discussion, a black man's perspective says, what this bill does is it keeps history out of our schools, Galliard said. Probably the best way to reproduce history is to not talk about it. This is an act to ensure discrimination, fanaticism, bigotry. The white man's perspective on the topic, according to Tim Moore, not me, the other one that's in North Carolina, in a press release, House Speaker Moore said the bill takes aim at critical race theory. They're focused on this. Get rid of that stuff. This is wholly unacceptable. No North Carolina schools should be teaching anti-American critical race theory in our school classrooms, much less competing for a grant from an organization focused on promoting critical race theory. And then when you ask people what critical race theory is, they don't even know. It's a legal procedure to discuss how race has been used against people for their advancement. And so it's uncovering those topics, and that's what people don't want to talk about. But even if you want to label it critical race theory, just talk about history, culture, and other people's experiences. If you don't want to know that, then how can you even grow? In North Carolina, it seems to be a hub for just mess, including what the hurricane just did. We just talked about this one particular legislature, and now we got a lieutenant governor, this guy named Mark Robinson. So I consider all this a distraction right now, though, because this character in the past called himself a black Nazi on some porn sites, porn stuff, sex stuff. See, distractions. Distractions. Got down the bottom there, Sean Combs. He was arrested September 19th. Distractions. Distractions. Who cares about what well, we do care. I mean, we're subjugating people and they said trafficking. So, I mean, yeah, it is a big story, but I'm just saying to have the story about, what is it? Baby oil? Baby oil? 1,000 bottles of baby oil? Like, that's something we should be focused on. And with this guy named Mark Robinson in North Carolina, his information, with the porn stuff, it's like distractions. There are real things going on in the world, like world wars happening, like China going to Taiwan, or America getting involved in that, like Israel bombing Lebanon, like America getting involved in that. So there's war, Russia, Ukraine. I mean, there's stuff. The francophone country stuff is happening all over the world, and we're dealing with some of this petty stuff. So even this, I could say buffoons on the run, because this guy is a character that now even Republicans don't want to support him. He says the bill comes amid increased scrutiny in schools around things like teaching on racial equity. Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson he even created a webpage so people could report attempts of, quote, indoctrination, unquote, of students, and established a task force to look into such allegations. Man, creating it like the thought police, like I said earlier. You got people who are saying there's thought crimes against people awakening their consciousness. And this is dangerous because this is now impacting voting. And this voter suppression is something that we really need to discuss. There's a reporter named Greg Palast who has done an excellent video, and I have supported and sent my money in to help him out. Vigilantes Incorporated, America's new vote suppression hitmen. About an hour and 30 minutes. But here's one of those segments about someone who helped produce this.
Hello, I'm Martin Sheen. Now, you may or may not be shocked to learn that there is a real threat to the 2024 election, but I can guarantee you will be shocked by the film you are about to see that exposes in no uncertain terms the full extent of that threat. The film is called Vigilantes Inc., and it follows the heroic investigative reporter Greg Palast as he uncovers a group of 40,000 MAGA volunteers whose efforts have already challenged the voting rights of 851,000 eligible voters with a goal of 2 million by November 5th. And nearly all of them are voters of color. Of course, all of this is just a new form of an old Jim Crow tactic first used in 1946 by the Ku Klux Klan to deny ballots to black voters. Only this time, they are using AI tricks and disinformation to deny ballots to blacks, Hispanics, and Asian American citizens. There is so little time left before the election, so I urge you to get involved by joining this heroic effort to expose voter suppression by going to saveyourvote.org. And remember, one vote can change an election, and one heart with courage is a majority. Thanks again.
Serious business, people. Serious business. So please take your time to go watch this video, because it is a damning case of just egregious acts against people who are so-called free. That's what I'm saying. Freedom is slavery in this country. You aren't really free if you can't vote. So, my last slide here before I show you some books, as we normally do. If you did not know, Jim Jones was a religious leader who had a cult. Took a bunch of people down to Guyana. And Jim Jones had about 900 people drink some cyanide in Kool-Aid, and they all died. Who does that? How can that happen? And what kind of cultural influence can make someone want to do that? Maybe a megalomaniac, a psychopath. But it's interesting that they say when Jim Jones was losing support, because again, when you're megalomaniac, a psychopath, and you gotta try to be a leader and in your totalitarian way of controlling people. When you start losing control, you have to think of ways to how can I get them back? He arranged fake assassination attempt as a ploy to draw people back in. Now I say fake ass here because I really want to continue with fake assassination. Fake ass assassination. We can fast forward to whatever's going on in 2024 with one of these candidates who may have some fake ass assassinations. When you're losing the race, you're losing momentum. You want to do something to trigger people to say, and maybe get them back on board. Well, Jim Jones did it. He's gone. You got one character doing it now. He's still here. But you can't get duped, people. Stay awake. Stay conscious. So again, the solutions. Read. Be aware. Keep reading. Be critical what you read. Read and tune away from the mass media. Because again, it's telling you a vision. Create your own visions by putting stories together. And as you read, you then engage and make positive changes in your lifestyle. And that's what I'm kind of recommending that you do. So that book I was telling you about by George Orwell, 1984, some heavy stuff. I mean, it's like a novel, so it might be a little difficult to read for those who aren't into that kind of structure of telling a story, but premonition. Talked about Big Brother. This is before the cameras were out on the streets watching you doing what you do. Before we had people excluding what you should be putting on a internet channel. You know? So something dumb, to let it go. Something educational, scrutinize. So that's a novel. I had another novel that I found exciting. I don't usually read the novels, but this one was intriguing to me. It's called Black. Just basically Black. Novel by Joan Vassar. Now, she has a couple of books, but this one caught my attention because this is about Nat Turner when he got executed, but he had a son. And the son carried on the tradition of what Nat Turner was trying to do. So she tells a beautiful story of what happens, with his genealogy being passed on. So I'm not usually reading novels, but some novels have some real good information about how we should be perceiving the world today. History. Howard French wrote a book called Born in Blackness. I recommend this book. He's actually a journalist. He's a journalist, and he breaks it down and kind of explains really what history is all about. The first impetus for the Age of Discovery was not Europe's yearning for ties with Asia, as so many of us have been taught in grade school, but rather its centuries-old desire to forge trading ties with legendarily rich black societies hidden away somewhere in the heart of darkest West Africa. Iberia's most famous sailors cut their teeth not seeking routes to Asia, but rather flying the coastline of West Africa. This is where they perfected techniques of map making and navigation, where Spain and Portugal experimented with improved ship designs, or where Columbus came to understand the functioning of Atlantic Ocean winds and currents well enough so that he would later be able to reach the western limits of the sea with confidence that no European had previously had before him, being able to return home. So basically, he's describing this is a war on black people. Infiltrating their culture, taking their resources, war on black people. So basically, Born in Blackness, definitely recommend this book. There's a book by an author named Christopher Thierret, Ancient Africa, A Global History to 300 Christian Era. Now, not real thick, easy to read, but I just found it interesting that, this white scholar he's from University of California, Los Angeles. There's no reference to black scholars that we know, from Chancellor Williams to Ivan Van Sertima to John G. Jackson, John Ray Clark. Our stuff is not in here, but it's got this talking about ancient history. It's got to be overlapping what those scholars talked about, but there's nothing in here from us. But the resource, but I'm just saying how we have a disconnect between culture groups presenting information. He definitely wouldn't have J. Rogers in there. So the things that he's talking about in this book, J. Rogers, I'm sure, is also able to uncover and has probably did it before that author, because J. Rogers is deceased now, but he has multiple books, but thick texts on our presence in the world and where we have been and what we have done. So when you talk about history, oh my goodness, that goes beyond just white people telling a story. That's why it's not about critical race theory. It's about just knowledge and information that's going to help you to grow, not stay in a bound mindset. History. That author Eret probably wouldn't have Charles Finch in his work. Nile Valley Civilization, a 10,000-year history. This is Dr. Finch's most recent book. Thick texts. Thick texts on the content of well before ancient Kemet. You're saying 10,000 years, we're talking about before those pyramids were built. So he's in the tradition of Sheikh Anta Diop, African Origins of Civilization, Myth of Reality, in the traditions of Gerald Massey, Ancient Egypt, Light of the World, in the tradition of Theophilo Benga. So this scholar, Charles Finch, this is a must book to have in your library. History. So people don't want you talking about history and things they've never heard of before, but how else are you going to understand that? Guess what? We had some black samurais. There's a book called African Samurai, the true story. It's not make up stuff. The true story of Yasuki, a legendary black warrior in feudal Japan. From what I understand is now being a movie being made about that, or some series. But again, books, the information, the knowledge. As I'm reading through this, captured my attention. I haven't been to Asia. Oh, I've been to Asia. I've been to Thailand and Vietnam. Went through Korea, but haven't been to Japan. But it's good stuff. African Samurai. I'm a brain man, so always want to know about how to make the information stick in our heads a little bit better. As I'm teaching now, seeing the children, the kids, the students today are not really prepared because the system we're going through, but on task, how our brain gets things done. So I think it's like another edition of this book. It's paperback and hardback. But what lies in the gap between knowledge and action? From getting all this information, how do you now translate that to do something? Knowledge and action. The origins of human cognition and control. The costs and benefits of control. Excuse me. So, on task, just a supportive book about what's going on with the brain and how we're acquiring information, because with this media and this artificial generation and the manipulation of information, and you not being able to process that, you can be duped. And that's what's happening a lot in this polytrick world we're living in right now. Another book. So we're dealing with politics, the unspoken truth of our racial divide, white rage. When I said that woman who was doing that report on the weather and the people who were seeking shelter and said AMC, like a movie channel, rather than AUC, like a intellectual arena, it's because she didn't know the black environment. So there's a divide in people's consciousness. And this book, Sister Carol Anderson really breaks down some real harsh realities of why we have this, and then what creates this white rage and what creates people wanting to support Trump, even though he's indicted as a criminal. You got to scratch your head on that. How does that happen? Rage. We have some things happening when we don't talk about other cultures and their history. You just think about your own little world, you become ignorant, become a bigot, become prejudiced. We have to open up our horizons. And the last book for today, The Black Box, Writing the Race, by Henry Louis Gates. Now, I don't usually read. I have some books by Dr. Gates here, but I just found this interesting because it's talking about how, his relatives mixed, like white, black, but when they have babies, what do you mark? You have a mixed child, what do you mark in the box? Black, white, So that's what the nature of this book is about. But I just found it intriguing as you started talking about some history. Wow, I didn't know there was a mass kind of riot in Cincinnati. I didn't know some of the information that was being stated about what happened in Ghana and certain people. So he's giving some pretty good history in this book called The Black Box, Writing the Race. So I definitely recommend this book. So those are my last recommendations for today. Don't make it too inundated for you in terms of too many books. But we have to be focused on not getting caught up in suppressed information. We have to expose the truth. And the only way we can do it is to get out there. So with the vote and the election coming, it really is a travesty for people to make excuses and say they don't want to be involved, because it's not really just at the presidential level. It's also the local level. Your voice must be heard. So again, don't let your mind, your thoughts be suppressed. Fight through. We will win this war. We will be back.